Hey, Dr. Rob.
Good evening, Tammy. So nice to see you today.
It is nice to see you. We were traveling last week together, and
We were.
it's nice to actually see each other in person. So, other than just
Yes.
this, so we do have a question. The first one is: my husband just deployed and won't be back until November. I just uncovered his sex addiction. He doesn't know that I know. I plan to not discuss this with him until his return. Is this a good idea? Also, how do I remain in control while speaking to him on the phone? I'm in so much pain, and I think he can tell when he talks to me.
I have mixed feelings about this one, Tammy. On the one hand, I understand that someone who's deployed for service, they don't necessarily need to hear any bad news from home unless it's really an emergency, like someone's sick. And so even though this might be an emergency for a spouse emotionally, I can understand the desire of a wife to say, I don't necessarily want to bring this up overseas. On the other hand, the pain is real. And what I'm curious about in listening to this is I'm not sure what this person means by, I found out about his sex addiction with him gone. It could mean that he's been looking at porn. It could mean that he's having affairs. It could mean all kinds of things. And so I just want to say to everyone else who's listening, just because you may have found something on a computer or a few things doesn't necessarily mean it's an addiction. It could mean it's all kinds of things, and we don't know. I don't know, and you may well have found an addiction. I'm just saying, like, that would be, to me, and finding an addiction would be finding a whole history of behaviors that have been carried out over a long period of time that I didn't know anything about, repeated behaviors, and finding out that something happened in the last year or recently once in a while would mean I found something out, but I'm not sure that it's an addiction. And again, these are things to learn about when you're in person. So, and the most important thing I can say to this person is I hope that he or she finds a lot of support from us and other people, because the truth is, how much can someone do when they're deployed except, yeah, I did that, or no, I didn't, or there's not a lot of process that can go on. But this partner can get so much support and understanding and work through, you can work through your rage, you can work through your hurt, you can be in a better place to begin to discuss this with your spouse when he comes back. And that's where I would put my energy into stuff you can actually do, like how can you grow, how can you learn, how can you become clearer on what this means to you. I think that's what you can do now. Tammy, do you have other thoughts?
Well, I actually, I have had the opportunity to speak with this person, and you are basically kind of mirroring what my sentiments were too. We have all these amazing resources on. I know I've been hanging with you long enough. So we have all these amazing resources on sex and relationship healing, including the podcasts and the drop-in groups and the webinars. All of this, the amount of information that can be learned and gleaned from now until November would make the discussion very different. Getting the supports to hold the space, I just think that there's a lot you can do to get support. And, I mentioned that you talk with the clients that are in Seeking Integrity treatment program, and it's news, weather, and sports. And so on some level, having more superficial but less painful discussions on a phone call may be somewhat helpful, just keeping kind of a boundary of, this is really safe territory.
And I would say also that there's nothing wrong, when your husband or spouse says to you on the phone, long distance, you sound like there's something going on. You can say, with you gone, there's so much going on and so many things I'd like to say. And, I don't even know where to begin, and I can't wait till you get back so we can get started. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying there's a lot on my mind and confirming his reality. But on the other hand, there's not a lot you can do really working on an issue like this with someone who's so far away in such an evolved job, but you sure can do a lot to get support and comfort and educate yourself about what you're really dealing with before he comes back.
And with that, we do have I was gonna say we're out of questions.
Okay, but one more thing, Tammy.
Yes,
Make
please.
sure, do chat, if you don't mind, would you type in that person's chat just where they can find some of the support groups for spouses and stuff?
I did. I already had emailed earlier today. So yeah. So
thank you. Good.
How do you handle reminders from betrayal? He told me he wanted to help me and stood by me, but he abandoned me and made it all worse due to no empathy and patience. He wanted me to forget about it. I stopped all contact, but reminders are something torturing me.
What do you think? I'm not sure I know what that means, but if you give it a little interpretation spin, Tammy, I can probably.
I have a feeling that there are triggers and reminders. So, I'm out for a drive and this park was where I, whatever. So how do you handle, the reminders and the things that are are making me sad and making me
Okay,
feel so
so
betrayed. Does that make sense?
I think I do, and I just read it myself, and I think that, you know, what you're saying is, I think, something that a lot of our spouses struggle with. So let me, even though you're not in the relationship anymore, I want to bring up this term that comes from our field. It's called ambivalent love. And, you know, it's kind of like I love you and I hate you at the same time. And in many relationships where all this stuff has been discovered and come out, you know, it's our partners are often really thrown because they still feel love for us, but they're also furious at us. And they feel like they can't live without us, but we've ruined their lives. I mean, it's just, I love you, I hate you, and so many real reasons for feeling that. And so to any partners who are here tonight, by the way, because I know there's like, gosh, 27 people here, you know, I want you to, your roller coaster ride, if you will, and I write about that in a couple of books, the ride you're on related to infidelity is really one of grief. And that's what I wanted to say to you. Even though you're no longer in touch with this person, you're going to grieve. And even though this person hurt you, and even though they let you down, nothing is black and white. You know, we say, you know, if I was married to Tammy and Tammy had affairs, and I would say, you ruined my life and I hate you. But there'd still be a part of me that cared, you know, because we're not, just because someone hurt us, we're just not, it's not that simple for us to let go. So good on you for having let go of the relationship, moved on, taken care of yourself. And what I would say is be kinder to yourself, because you're grieving a connection that meant something to you. And even if the connection went bad or it wasn't what you thought it was, it still mattered to you. This person mattered to you. And when the relationship ends, it's going to be, there are going to be reminders. So for those of you who say, I don't understand, well, I should still be thinking about him or her when they ruined my life, it doesn't mean you weren't still connected and the relationship didn't have meaning. And even if you walk away, you will be connected to them for a very long time. I'm getting a little sun on me, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna move my screen here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And with some reminders, you can do something about it, you know, like if it's, you know, paint a room, I mean, if there's something where you, no, I say this,
Well, I'm thinking of the Tammy solutions. Build a house, paint a room,
I
start a
do.
business.
Yes, I am very much of, when things feel out of control, I find, so Rob and I have talked about cleaning. When everything else is out of control, we go do something that, you know, we're cleaning our
We can
toilets
control.
because we, you know, we can do that by, you know, by golly. And so it's one of those things where, you know, if there's something that I can make look different so that I go, now that has my, you know, whatever, I do that. I honestly have, you know, I that's what I do. So if there are practical things where you go, I mean, like you still need to grieve, trust me, like all of that still happens, but
Yep.
there are things where I go, but I, you know, like I like my sunny yellow office or whatever, you know?
I think though what Tammy you're talking about is how, you know, like with any loss, start to do things that belong to you, that you can enjoy for you, that really aren't fully related to this person, past or present, so that you can start to feel good about you, even though you're grieving. I think that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And you know, if my route home from work always went by the park where we always walked,
Right,
I'd either reclaim the park and it'd be my new space to do whatever, or
right,
I'd pick a
right.
different route, you know? I mean, like I am very practical I mean, I grieve, trust me, but on some level, I find some things where I have a modicum of control in the solution. So it doesn't fix everything, but it does
And
just make
by the
me
way,
feel better.
just to Tammy's point, I hope all of you are hearing that, you know, we've worked on ourselves a lot. We've done a lot of therapy. We've done a lot of 12-step, but I still move to being compulsive when I'm stressed out. I just find useful purposes for that
Mhm.
compulsion rather than being sexually compulsive. I will get all the laundry done or get to the store and get my shopping done, and then I feel like I've accomplished something. And even though it may be, you know, 9 at night and I probably should just be relaxing, at least it helps ease my mind about something, not the real problem, but I feel better about something. It's like, if you don't mind me saying, I think everybody's running around buying hand stuff and, you know, Advil and, you know, getting ready for this virus. And, you know, that is really more about making ourselves feel better. There's just not a whole lot you can do. We don't really know what's going to happen. But when you go to the store and you buy out half the water and half the dried soup, you got to feel like you're doing something, you know, and I get, and that's okay. It's okay to feel a sense of control over difficult circumstances.
If I'm dusting the blinds, I hate doing that. That means I really need some soothing. So, okay, next question, which is an interesting one. Did Tiger Woods really have a sex addiction?
So I didn't know Tiger Woods, so I can't really say. But I can say that, you know, I know about his history, and I would say that understanding how his father raised him and how he was brought up, that he certainly has had a fair amount of trauma and abuse. And I can imagine that he would struggle with issues around that. And since we know that he has been arrested for illegal drinking and using, and he's admitted to drug addiction, alcohol, he's admitted to sex addiction. So I think this is someone who has probably a lot of emotional challenges. And, you know, I think it's sometimes hard, and I don't know if this relates to Tiger Woods or not, but it's hard for us to understand when someone is extraordinarily successful or does really well in different parts of their life and they can achieve. It's really hard for us to understand why they can't just not act out with sex or just stop drinking. And the thing is because those other things that they've done, the Bill Clintons and Tiger Woods of the world, they've had tremendous intellectual and talent-based achievement, but not so much emotional achievement. And we've learned over the past 20 years, if you don't have solid attachments, if you don't have good relationships, if you don't have good support, it doesn't matter how smart and, you know, clever you are, how good your golf game is, you're still going to be miserable. And so, yeah, I think that's a man who's had problems all his life and probably always will.
And I wanted to comment on the did he have, and, you know, with addiction, it's not like, well, I used to have that and now I don't. It's like, it's one of those where, yes, it's one of those where, you know, if I'm struggling with addiction, I can live in recovery, so I don't have to live in the addiction, but it's never like, oh, you know, I don't abide by the people that go, I'm a recovered whatever, because I think it's always a process. And like Dr. Rob was just talking about, you know, we continue to work on ourselves and to strive further in recovery. So, okay, next question. My husband.
And our houses are clean.
Sometimes the blinds are even clean. So.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So my husband of 30 plus years and I are separated due to his secrecy and lying for the duration of our marriage. His first 3 years of relapse is supposedly sober, 8 to 9 months. My concern, he has an iPhone with a filter, but a laptop with no filter, a Fire Stick, Amazon, Netflix, you know, all the things, in which, in my opinion, they are slow erotic movies. I said it upsets me, and I can't. He said I can't tell him what he can and cannot watch. That's between him and his sponsor. I think we've answered this before.
No one answer this.
Okay, he's not going to cut himself off from everything because that's not reality. He said his therapist and sponsor knows he's not going to download anything inappropriate on the Fire Stick. Dr. Rob, at what point in an addict's recovery are they able to have unfiltered access to such apps, movies, laptop, when they have enough self-control and not relapse? Also, what is it considered safe viewing standards for porn addict to watch intimate movies that show sex scenes? Am I making more out of this than it is?
Okay, so I want to go back to the beginning of this question, which says, my husband of 35 years and I are separated due to his secrecy and lying. So if I was separated from my partner and we had some goal of getting back together, if I was the person who'd been doing the acting out, I wouldn't be running around saying, oh, my therapist said this was okay and you don't get to fool her. If I wanted to get back with my partner, I would do whatever it took. And, or, you know, within reason. And if you wanted to read my journal or you wanted to see what my plan looked like for recovery, or, you know, you can have at it. I have nothing to hide. And so I agree with your husband, by the way. What he chooses to do with his sex life is up to him and his sponsor and maybe his therapist. You have nothing to say about it, but you have a lot to do and a lot to say about whether you want to be with him or not. And I wouldn't want to be living with or working on healing with someone who wasn't willing to put away all that crap. You know, I know wives, spouses, Tammy knows them. They'll put a tracker on the man or on their husband or wife's computer or phone, and they want to report every day of where that person's been looking at and what they've been doing. And you know what? If you've been cheating on someone for 20 years and you finally decide to get it right, I think you have lost the right to say, oh, well, you know, everybody else says I'm telling the truth. The most important person that has to believe him is you, and you don't believe him. So I would double down on the not living together part, and I would stick with my boundaries, which is I don't give a flying F what your therapist or your sponsor says. That's what I would say to him. This is what I want in my marriage, and you're not in my marriage, so I don't give a flying F what you do out there, which I would suggest to you while he's out there and you're separated. That's up to him. He can look at whatever he wants, but if he wants to get back with you, then you're going to have to agree on what health is in your marriage. And no therapist or outside sponsor can tell you what you want in your marriage. That's up to you. And you get to stick by that, and that's just fine with me.
Okay. So then there's part 2 to this. So technology is one area I feel I should have some say, even though we are not living together right now, but talking about doing. Footnote, none of his recovery work is partner trauma, betrayal related. We are looking for a seasoned CSAT marriage therapist that can handle his antisocial and narcissistic pushbacks, but
Oh,
I am having a hard time finding one.
okay. So here's a start. I wrote a book about this called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. Tammy will type it to you.
I was gonna
I would
say,
type, but I don't have it. The reason that I wrote Out of the Doghouse is because most men that I've worked with, even the ones who are less narcissistic and less self-obsessed, they still don't know how to heal a broken heart with a woman. They just don't. Most men I've worked with, even the kindest, most loving guys, just think that flowers and Valentine's Day and let me just take you on a vacation and then in 6 weeks you're going to love me again. And they don't understand, none of them do. Men don't. The challenge that women have accepting, dealing with betrayed trust and re-accepting someone in a relationship. So the book is, what it is his direction to your husband about what you're going through, about who you would expect to be seeing him to be if you were going to take him back. And if he says, well, I don't want to do all that apologizing, or I don't want to have to be more responsible around the house, or I don't want to have to be one down in my relationship until she forgives me, then you probably should find the next husband of 35 years. But that's what the book tells him to do. I tell him how to have humility and respect for the harm that he's caused. There are 2 versions of this book. There is both a secular version of Out of the Doghouse, and there's a Christian version of Out of the Doghouse that I wrote with a colleague of mine, a pastor friend, who put in scripture to reinforce for the Christians among you that, what it means to have integrity in an intimate marriage, because it's right there in the Bible. So in any case, I would suggest it worth getting a copy of Out of the Doghouse, reading it. It will give you a sense of the kind of responses you might want to see from your husband or a partner. And then I would throw it at him, which is, what most spouses do with books that I write. They read them and then they throw them at the men in their lives.
so this is a copy of the secular version of the book. So, and I did type it in
Thanks.
the chat so that everybody can look online for that. And as Dr.
And
Rob says, he makes 12 cents. So it's
I
not,
make 12 cents a book because publishers make 99.9% of all, but you'll read a great book and it will help you. And we'll have the same language for working together.
Okay, so the next question. I discovered my boyfriend's compulsive behavior on December 31st. Oh, and since we have had a great deal of turmoil and false starts, including 3 sessions with sex addiction therapist who is not a good fit, we are both still very much in crisis. The recommended treatments seem very intense and expensive, and I think we are both wary of jumping back in at the moment. I do have an individual therapist. Thank you so much for all the resources you provide, the Q&A, podcasts, et cetera. One of the few options that doesn't feel like all or nothing. Aside from the podcasts and webinars, what do you recommend as a starting point for those of us who might be at a place where we need to ease into a little bit? Partners and addicts, we know about SAA, and I just ordered Out of the Doghouse.
Well, I think the more you can educate yourself, the better. So, there are different kinds of sex addicts and different degrees of the problem. And there are people who act out who have sexual problems who aren't sex addicts, but they act out anyway. And so the more you can learn, I wrote Sex Addiction 101. I'm sorry to sell my books another 12 cents, but Sex Addiction 101 was a very basic guide to the problem. There are others who've written very basic guides. Read them. Go to listen to as many people as you can hear online talking about these issues. Listen to Paula Hall. Paula Hall, Hall, a friend of mine, has a TED Talk talking about sex addiction. You can learn more about it from that. I just think, and then come to as many drop-in groups and support groups. And I've seen this, by the way, I want to say this. Tam, I don't think I've said this before. With a lot of the younger couples, like the ones who've been together 3, 4, 5 years, maybe they have a kid, maybe they don't. They do really well in these rooms together, I've noticed. Like the older couples, they kind of want to come separately, but the younger ones, they kind of want to learn at the same time. And I think that if you can get your spouse into these rooms with you, to be listening together, to be learning together, to be asking questions together, that is the best way you're going to learn. And we have a lot of opportunities that cost nothing for you to come ask a whole bunch of questions, either together or separately. And it's spaces like that where you will get your answers. You're certainly welcome to write Tammy. Tammy's at Tammy@seekingintegrity.com. And Tammy can refer you to other therapists in your area if you really aren't happy with the person you're seeing. Just to say it isn't really recommended that an addict and their partner go to the same therapist in my field. I would prefer that you see someone separate, that you see your therapist and the addict sees an addiction specialist. And then maybe when you want to work on this, you go to the addiction specialist together, or you do some workshops or weekends, or there's endless stuff in this world that, meaning this recovery world that we're involved in, endless opportunities to grow and learn. So from, going to treatment to not. But I do want to tell you something about treatment. I have been running and managing sex addiction treatment centers for 25 years. I've been licensed. Tammy, did you know this? I think you do. 25 years in the state of California. And I have started and created probably 5 or 6 intimacy disorder, sexual disorder programs for men, for women. We have currently a program that also addresses the interaction of sex and drugs and people who have sex and alcohol and drug problems. And I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I have never seen anyone who went into treatment who said at the end, oh, this was too soon, or I wish I hadn't done this now, or gosh, I could have used 3 more years out there before. Treatment is, if it's done right with the right people, with us or others, it is a 1.5 years of therapy for you, for your spouse. It is a complete somersault into the healing process, only because those of us who are doing this kind of work, your husband is, or you are eating, breathing, and living it, like you are eating and breathing and living the problem. And Tammy has said this before, but I've always, when someone comes back from treatment, you've really got a different spouse. Now, they may not be empathic and nurturing and, I'm so sorry, they may not be quite ready with empathy, but they are absolutely aware of the harm they've caused you, of what they've done to their own lives, of where it comes from. It's very important for us to get the addicts out of shame and into a place of self-reflection, because so many of them feel that they're worthless, bad people, perverts, all that stuff. So I just would suggest to you that, and this isn't to sell you anything, it is my sincere belief, that people who enter treatment, especially couples who really get in on this problem early, they move fast. And yeah, you can go to therapy once a week for a year, and you can go to 2 or 3 12-step meetings once a week for a year, twice a week, and that's important. But if you want to move fast and you want your relationship to heal, and you can find the resources to do it, treatment is amazing. And I'm talking about anything from couples workshops or weekends, all the way to, a couple of weeks of residential work or IOP. So I just want to give that, if treatment is done well, and if good people are doing it, the results can be extraordinary, in my opinion. And that's because that's what we are trained to do. I am trained to take you at the moment of greatest crisis and help you find not only the solution to that crisis, but to figure out what's not working in your life and inside of you, so you can have a path toward healing. And I don't ever think it's too soon to get that. So yes, if you're unsure the problem exists, yeah, you want to really get to the depth of how bad this problem is. Maybe it's just something that could be resolved with a little bit of therapy in 12-step. But if it is a devastating, ruined my marriage, totally took me by surprise, I never thought we were going to be here kind of problem, treatment is a wonderful opportunity for you both to grow. And I can't recommend it highly enough. And that is true.
So I put in the chat, the Couples Healing from Betrayal workshop. Consider that, because it's just a weekend for the 2 of you, and that might be a good start. I'm going to parade the rest of his book. So here's the Christian edition of Out of the Doghouse. You're talking about him. Sex Addiction 101. I didn't grab the workbook, but there's an accompanying workbook. And then, because we haven't mentioned it yet, but it will no doubt come up, codependence. So this is a different lens at looking at working with the loved ones. It's not you are an enabler, you are at fault, you. It's, gosh, you really love this person and they're broken, and we want to help support both of you, in this process. So, okay.
And Tammy's right. Okay. So this is what I'm compulsive about. I think Tammy just showed you. I've written 9 or 10 books in my recovery and as a professional. And, I try to write very simple things that are very clear and understandable, but that aren't stupid. Because I think therapists, and when I train, any of you, by the way, could go to one of my trainings, therapy trainings, and 99% of what you hear is no different than what the therapist hears, and you would get as much as they do, because we can all talk in complex, mucky muck talk, but it doesn't really serve us. I think if we all had the same language for the same problems, and so that's the way I write. But there are more intensive clinical books. Pat Carnes writes them. There are a lot of folks who write books on sex addiction. Read and learn as much as you can.
I agree. Okay, so for a single person in recovery, is there an online dating site that is best in looking for real relationships, not just hookups? There is one. I have his card somewhere. Shoot, email me because
Where would they email you?
I already put it in the chat, but email me because his name is Joaquin. I remember that. And I have his card. I just ran across it again the other day, but he created and it wasn't just a sex addiction. It was like an addiction recovery dating site. And I thought that was a really cool concept. I just can't remember what it's called. So,
and I'm glad you brought that up, because I do want to say that just because you're in 12-step recovery, I thought of the same thing. I was like, oh, well, you want to go to a recovery dating site. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Just because it's a recovery dating site, there are a lot of recovering alcoholics in there, a lot of recovering drug addicts in there, a lot of recovering gamblers in there who are sex addicts, and they have not dealt with or resolved those issues. So if you go, I was thinking the same thing as you, Tammy, and then I thought, but if you just go to a general addiction recovery site, you might run into some great addicts in recovery who haven't looked at their sexual issues. So, that's not a guarantee. Reality is, first of all, I always think if you're looking for a healthy person, why not look where the healthy people are? And they're all out there on the dating websites, and they're not worried about being the wrong person, because they know how to date. And the other thing I would say to you as a single person is, and Tammy and I talk about this all the time, you really need, dating is not something that any of us do particularly well, not partners, not addicts. Addicts tend to, we tend to get very skewed in how we view our relationships and our partnerships, because we're very needful of love, and we can create all kinds of situations that aren't good for us. Our partners can put up with things that aren't, dating can be difficult for us. So I think that you would be well served by having some really good people around you who know your stuff cold. And before you go on a date, after you come back from every date, and you talk to them, this is what this person was like, this is how it went. I will make a suggestion to every single sex addict in the room, male or female: please don't have sex unless you ask permission first. Now, not saying go ask your mother for permission. That would be kind of weird, or me or Tammy, but this is what sponsors are for. This is what 12-step recovery is for. This is what people in your group therapy are for, to have that phone number of someone who knows this really detailed, difficult part of your life well. And they're going to say to you, what are you, crazy? You want to date that person again? They don't have a job, a car, or an apartment. And you're going to say, oh, but they're so cute. We lose our perspective. Dating is, by the way, for those of you who are single, it is going to a ugly, brightly lit coffee shop in 2 separate vehicles or 2 separate ways of getting there, and then you leave separately. And your next date is probably going to be a walk in the park, literally, like outside. In other words, we're not going into cars, we're not going to apartments, we're not having sex right away, we're not even doing wine and candles and romance. If you want to date in a healthy way, for us, people with these issues, we have to get to know each other and get to know each other reasonably well before we lose ourselves in romance and sex. So the whole process of dating is a little different, but you don't have to go to a different place to do the dating. The difference is you have to get the support for conducting your dating life in a healthy way. It isn't so important to me, unless you're going to sex sites, where you get the date. What is important to me is how you discern, is that someone healthy for you to go on that second date with? And I know it's not something you could discern on your own, because I've met too many sex addicts and their partners. We need support. We need a posse. If you're going to date, you need dating plans and a dating posse, and then go have fun.
Well, and you find things that you're interested in. Like if you like to run, you join a running club. You'll meet people who have similar interests. Sorry about that. I like to hike. So yeah, hiking, running, all of those things, people that share an interest that I like would be in those kind of groups. So I think if you explore what you like to do that's healthy, you can find people, take an art class, whatever it is that you wish to do, but you can meet some people that have similar interests. And even if you don't meet the person there or someone to date, they have friends. So that's, create a bigger circle.
And may I say that I think going out in the world with the intention of meeting a whole bunch of people and growing your life and growing and having more fun and hobbies and is the best place to be inside of yourself, to go meet somebody, because you never know. You're going to be working at that potting wheel. You're going to be singing in that choir. You're going to be catching that outfield ball, and you're going to run into that person you want to, get to know better.
So the next question is addiction really selfish, as the big book says? My thoughts are it is if you know it's not good for you and others and you still do it, but not before.
So I could be wrong, Tammy. You're my big book expert, but I don't believe the big book says that addiction is selfish. I think what the big book says is that recovery is selfish. And I love that expression, you know, that this is a selfish program. We're here for ourselves. Because, so I'm going to just give my perspective. What that means to me is I don't get to lie to you, Tammy, not because I want to just look good and get away with stuff, but if I lie to you, my recovery will suffer. In other words, to me, the 12-step programs have always said, I have to walk the narrow line of being a good person and having integrity and being honest, because if I don't walk that line, I will end up hurting myself with my addiction because I start worrying, getting anxious, telling lies. It's just not any way we can live. And so for me, it's a selfish process in a way, because I may not be in my recovery, I might be more honest, more fair, more kind, and more empathic because I want my life to go better, not necessarily because I'm thinking about you, but because I want my life to go better. I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to be out of my integrity, and I'm going to be more honest and real with you. So in my world, that's how I think about it. Tammy?
And I think addiction is I think addicts are really selfish. We want what we want. We'll do anything to keep our ability to act out in our addiction. So I think we, despite our loved ones, friends, warnings, consequences, until and unless we have tools to live in recovery, our addiction is selfish, but in a very negative way, where Dr. Rob was talking about selfish in a positive way, where it's like, it's self-preservation. I have to learn these tools because I want to live differently. So to me, that's a positive. But with addiction, it's like, you know, despite negative consequences, despite, you know, how hard this is, you know, or how much this is hurting you, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do because I'm going to do it. And you know, but it's very challenging because it's like you're caught in this loop and unable to get out until you get tools to use in recovery. So hopefully that's helpful.
Great.
So not really a question, but I, female, have been practicing abstinence for about a month. I noticed that without sex, I am unable to manipulate my husband into doing things for me or getting what I want out of the relationship. I have been treating sex like a commodity in my relationship, or for bargaining and bartering. I am getting frustrated with him and his behaviors, and I'm not sure where to go now that sex has been removed from the equation.
Wow, I wish every woman in America could read that, because you know what? This is the flip side of Me Too. And I don't mean that I don't mean, Tammy knows, and some of you know, I've done a lot of work with women around Me Too, and I've written about it and been supportive. But on the other hand, there is a voice in me as a man who says, yeah, you know, this is where men are vulnerable, that we can be taken advantage of when someone wants to lead us around the nose by using sex. And by the way, if you do that, we will probably respond to you longer, because you're always new, you're always fresh to us, because, and newness and freshness is what is appealing to men, because we can't quite get a hold of you, can't quite grab that relationship, and so we will keep running after you. But I really love what you said, your honesty. You busted yourself and you said, you know, I think sex has been something I've been using to manipulate my husband. So here's the deal. What have you, this is what I would do. If I was your therapist, is what I would do. I would sit down and write a list of things that you have manipulated him for. I manipulated my husband around sex to get this. I manipulated my husband around sex to get that. I manipulated my husband around sex so we would do more of this or less of that, or whatever it is you thought it was doing. And then I would ask you, how is it you could get those things from and with your partner without sex? I imagine it's something to do with talking. So what I hear about your relationship is that there's some communications issues, not unusual for people who are addicts. We're not used to asking for what we want. And you said this beautifully. We're more used to trying out ways to manipulate people into giving us what we want without us having to ask for it. And this, by the way, is a survival skill from childhood. In case you feel badly that you've used sex to manipulate your husband, manipulating people without being clear about what we want is a way to not get hurt. Because if I hint at and drop things and crumbs about what I want, or try to push you into something and you do it, well, then I'm in control. I controlled you right into getting me that thing or doing that. But if I ask you, if I make myself vulnerable, which is, by the way, to create intimacy, and I say, hey, this is going on with me and I really need this and I really want this and I'm not happy with that. And well, what does that mean? Because you have no control in that situation. He might do it, he might not. He might listen, he might not. He might negotiate. So what you're talking about, how do I manage my marriage when I can no longer control the sex, is really a question that's saying, how can I begin to be a full partner in my marriage, a contributing member of this relationship? I think those are issues for therapy, couples therapy in particular, where you learn to, I was frustrated when you didn't do such and such, and before I would have just had sex with you. Now I have to actually ask you, and what if you don't do it? And how do I feel about that? And now you may be entering the real relationship with your husband that you have never had. So it's tricky because he's angry, he's hurt. I mean, if he knows about all this stuff and he's dealing with his piece and you're just trying to be a better partner, I would always lean into letting him know what you're feeling rather than trying to get him to do something without telling him. By the way, oh, one more thing, Tammy. If you're someone who has used sex to manipulate your spouse, I would look at what else you use to manipulate your spouse. Do you use anger? Do you use, one of my favorites, guilt? Do you use tears? And I've certainly seen women use tears to, how do you manipulate your man? Because the person who is not assertive, you may think you're assertive, but you're not, because assertive people simply say, I need and want this. They don't manipulate. So if you're not an assertive person, then it's probably not just the sex that you use to try to get what you want. What else do you use would be a great question and opportunity for you to grow. I wouldn't necessarily share that with your husband, but I think for you, it's a really good thing to work on. Anyway, that's what I got.
Oh, that's a great response. Okay, next one. My husband is a sex addict. He acted out with prostitutes. He said he didn't enjoy it, didn't want to, but felt like he had no choice.
Please.
I
Oh,
know.
please. Excuse me. I have to stop you there.
I know.
Okay. He enjoyed it because he had sex with these people and they were fresh bodies and he paid for it and he had fun. So, that's a bunch of crap. Of course he enjoyed it.
He claimed after every time he thought it would never happen again, his shame was too great to get help.
That part is probably true. That every time afterwards he said, I hate myself, I can't believe I did this, I'm never going to do this again. It's like every alcoholic who swears off the bottle, after a bad night, and 3 days later they're back in the bar. I mean, I'm sure he swore off and believed it, but without any accountability or structure, he was always going to end up where he began.
He acts like he is in a state of disbelief. This happened, like this ever happened, like I am. He can't answer how or why he did this. Not sure if it's significant, but he was sexually abused by a male babysitter at age 5. He just started having memories of it. Yes, a lot of emotional trauma too. My big question is, how much of this was his choice versus addiction or compulsion?
It's both. I guess that's a tricky question. Let me answer this in this way. When I'm an active addict and I have no awareness that I have an addiction, I just want to go do this and I don't want you to find out. I'm very limited in how I can talk to you, communicate with you, grow with you. And it is a choice that I make to go act out, but unconsciously and on almost every level it isn't, because addiction means that I am compelled to do it. I feel drawn into it. I start thinking and fantasizing and I end up there whether I want to or not. So if someone really has an addiction, here's where the choice is. The choice is, I want to change my life. I don't want to do this ever again. What can I do to make my life different? That is making a choice. Saying I'm never going to do it again is just responding to the bad feelings afterward and then doing it again. So no, he can't answer how or why, because he needs to grow and learn. And this is, for so many of us, I understand that addiction, especially those of you who are here, addiction feels like this tremendous burden that's been visited upon your relationship or yourself. And you would do anything to not have it. And I understand that. But I want to tell you, and I think Tammy will agree, that I would not be as good a person as I am. I would not be as kind or as empathic or as curious. I would not be as successful or creative or engaged in life had I not had an addiction, because having to move beyond that problem forced me to have to grow in ways that I never would have been forced to grow if I simply just drank a little or occasionally had an affair. Or so, as painful as hard as it is, if both members of a couple or individuals, if you guys are willing to see this as the greatest opportunity you've had in your adult life to grow, boy, will you have a different life. And I regret nothing about the past. I regret that I could have been a better person. I regret that there were people I hurt. I regret that the time could have been spent more productively. But in terms of being ashamed of it or wishing I had, life is what it is. I'm so grateful to be on this side of it. And I would just wish that for all of you. It's like what I said about treatment earlier. Someone was like, well, we're English. We are really early on. We're not sure we want to do treatment. I'm like, well, how fast do you want to get well? It's like the faster you get through these lessons, the better. And a lot of them you can do quickly, especially when you're in a crisis.
And I agree with a lot of what you said. I regret that there were people hurt because of my addiction, but that was all part of it. And unfortunately, I had wreckage in my past that just goes with addiction. So like you, I didn't have the coping tools to deal with life. And so recovery has given me all of that. I do not for 1 minute regret being an addict. I think differently. Like I've had to learn that this is just how my brain thinks. And so, but I have tools, I have support to make sure that I don't go off the rails, so I am, when I first heard it, when people were like, I'm a grateful recovering, addict. And I was like, oh, please, guess what I turned into? And, addiction steals everything and recovery gives benefits beyond belief. And so you have it's horrible, it's hard, it's chaotic, it's, and I feel
it's unfair.
It's unfair. It's all of those terrible negative things. But is there healing and hope? Absolutely. For the people that choose it, and not everybody does. I deal with plenty of people that go, he's never going to change, and that's sad to me. That's incredibly sad. But I hope your husband goes, I really want help. I really want to learn to do life differently, because, you guys stand a great chance. Dr. Rob has shared before, most of the couples, that come to our program, most of the couples find a path through, to be able to stay together if that's their goal. So, we don't, we don't require that, but, if that's their goal, we sure want to help support that. So, okay, here. Okay, so how do I get my spouse in the rooms? I've been married almost 2 years.
Why don't you start, Tim?
Well, I'm like, on some level, it's leverage. It's like,
well,
this
wait,
isn't
hold on
working.
A second. Explain to everyone else what in the rooms means, because they may not know what that means.
Well, in the rooms. So, and I don't know if this is in the rooms.com or if it's like the 12-step, meetings and things like that. So on some level, it's like, this isn't working, and I really care about you, and what can we do? And if they refuse to do that, then there are consequences. And we, listened to someone earlier who, they were not living together anymore because it just doesn't work. So whatever creates healthy, like you have separate bedrooms, like, this is not working for me, I need you to have a separate bedroom. Whatever it is that you can create that is a negative consequence for the person, so that their willingness to go get help is what you're disagreeing.
Well, I think negative consequence, yes, but not a punishment.
Not a punishment, but it's like, if I'm keeping myself healthy, because you're not going to sleep with me if you're not willing to go get help to work on your sex addiction. It's not safe for me. So
I do feel like so many of our spouses put up with far more than they should. And I say to you guys often, kick the bum out. Like, please kick him out, or her. But because it will solve so many problems, and it might bring a whole bunch of solutions. If you just stand up and say, I'm done, I can't do any more of this, I'm done, you'll be amazed at what changes. But I want to say something else about that. Hold on to that question.
You were reacting to my negative consequences.
Well, no, I think only because I could say to someone, go to your room, like give them a consequence, but that's not what I think you meant. I think what you meant is you have to be true to yourself as a partner.
Right.
And if that creates situations that the addict doesn't like you're not going to dinner with them, you're not sleeping with them, you're not living with them, that's too bad, because that's on the addict. That is the only way to affect change, is to say, what you are. So if I was living with an active addict and they were not willing to get help, I would say, I need you to go to 3 meetings a week, AA, let's say they were an alcoholic. I want those meetings signed. I want to see the signed note when they come back. And if you don't, you can go live with your mom, because I don't want you coming home tonight. And I think that is such a such an important gift to an addict to be willing to stand up to their addiction with love. I love you too much. I love us too much to be willing to put up with this. I love you enough to kick you out. This isn't, I want you to be different and I'm kicking out. This is, or whatever the consequence is, this has to come from, I love myself more than to put up with this. I love what we have shared more than to continue what we've been doing. And you hold out the light for the hope and the change, even if you're showing someone the door. And I do want to say, though, one more thing. While I do challenge the partners that you are too easy on us and should probably kick us out more often, I do think that we're really good liars. And so those of us who are addicts are constantly saying, oh, no, I didn't do that. And it is getting better. And I am going to, and you want to believe us. Why wouldn't you? Because you love us. And so I think we gaslight you for a long time until some of you are really ready to say, wait a minute, this is just a bunch of crap. On the other hand, some of you want us to heal faster than we are able to, meaning you want us to stop the behavior and you want us to be empathic and loving and caring and attentive and engaged. And some of us could just barely stop acting out, no less become a more wonderful husband. That might take a long time. So it takes work and time on both ends, but I think this is a gift. This process is a gift to anyone who's willing to embrace it and give their lives over to it.
And I agree. Okay. So the next question. Disclosure question. I have been acting out throughout my 20-year marriage. I've been sober for 6 months, but my disclosure has come in dribs and drabs over that time. First, it was just one affair, then in multiple affairs. Then I came clean about 20 years of acting out. Throughout, my amazing and supportive wife has emphasized that the full and complete truth is more important than trying to protect her from knowing about the painful things I've done. Although I've taken some time, I really, truly get that now. But I honestly don't remember all the times I acted out or all the women that I've slept with or all the times I lied because of my addiction. How do I strike a balance between my wife's legitimate desire for complete accountability, or accounting, and my genuine inability to remember all the acting out that I've done over the years? When is imperfect disclosure enough?
Well, first of all, I just want to give this person kudos for, the way you described your process sounds about right. I didn't want to tell her. I thought it would make it worse for her. I thought it would hurt her. I thought it would break us up. Everybody goes through that. And we finally hopefully get to, oh no, she means what she says. She just wants to know what's happened. And, not what we're afraid of, but what the reality is. And so, so this is the question you ask, how can I be sure that I'm giving complete disclosure, is something that we've thought about in our field. And so when we do disclosure, most generally it involves a therapist or a treatment environment. So again, a good reason for treatment. One of the things we do with every client is do a very detailed history of your whole life. This is what we do. And by the way, Tammy, now you can pull out that workbook. I wrote about this in a workbook, this exercise for being ready to disclose. And what it really means, and it's in the workbook, and it might also be in Sex Addiction 101, it's definitely in Sex Addiction 101, the workbook, is I taught you how to do in the book, how to do a timeline. And this is something we do in treatment where we look at let's say if you're 40, we look at 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and we put lines up for your career life, your personal life, and then your addictive life. And we start to look at the relationships, like, oh, dad died when I was 23, and then I started acting out. My wife had her second child. And so I would suggest to you, certainly I would suggest going to see a professional to work on disclosure, because I think that you'll have a better you will be kinder and more generous to each other if you do, and more thorough. Or come to treatment and we will go through it all. Believe me, you'll know exactly what you did by the time you leave and then some. I don't think it's a good idea to give a partner partial disclosure anymore, because we consider that like torture. It is a drip, drip, drip of information that is going to leave, that if they find out there's more, let me say it a different way. What your wife really wants, what all spouses really want in the beginning, is just to know, how bad has it been? Where is the bottom to this free fall that I'm in? Where's the foundation of our relationship? Did you love another person? Did you, what exactly happened here? Because they have been in the dark. And while we struggle with, should I tell them? Should I tell them this, tell them that? They just want to know what has been going on in their life. And that's why we just do disclosure in part. We think people have a right to know what they've been married to, especially if we're asking them to continue to be married. So I truly don't think that creating a disclosure is something that you should do alone. I absolutely think it's something to do with a sponsor, people in 12-step program, even better a therapist, even better in a treatment program, because I don't want you saying things in a way that might be harmful. So here's another thing we do in disclosure. We're very careful to make sure it isn't an apology. So you're not saying, oh, please forgive me because I really loved you all the time and I didn't mean to hurt you. We work really hard to make sure it isn't an excuse. Like, oh, well, I didn't know I was an addict before, but now I do. This disclosure is just an inventory of what you've done in non-graphic terms. I saw 12 sex workers. I had 2 affairs. I spent this much money. I had an STD, whatever the facts are. That's about it. And then you have to be prepared for the emotional challenges that will come for both of you when all those facts are on the table. And I think the preparation work for disclosure, that's also a part of it. It's not just about you getting all the facts straight. Let's say you sit down to disclosure and your spouse says, I don't want to see you for the next 3 days. Or, you know, where are you going to go? Where's she going to go, or he? How are you going to take care of each other and yourselves if your spouse is so angry at you for what you just said that they don't want to talk to you? Have you already planned who they're going to talk to, where they're going to go, where you're going to sleep tonight? We organize all of this in treatment so that everybody has a fair chance of getting through this process with the hope for a healthy relationship. So I encourage you to do this, but I really encourage you to do it with help.
Yes, and what you just said was so critically important is organizing the data. It isn't like, you know, the names of everybody that you ever slept with. I mean, like all of that, it's categories, and it's, you know, I spent this much, and it's, you know, it's all of those type of things, but it's data that's relevant but not extra traumatizing. And so getting support, getting help to do that. I get so many of the after they've said. In fact, the next one, as a husband, I confess to all my affairs. And I read that and I go, okay.
Right.
What I have discovered is all the traumas, PTSD I experienced growing up and how this influences my behavior. Recently, a counselor told me all the traumas influence these sex addiction behaviors. I was not aware of how much these traumas, molested, physical abuse, father, mother, violent relationships, etc., influenced all my wrongdoings. I shared all of this with my wife, and we continue to build and develop intimacy. I know this is not justification to be a sex addict, but I think it is a way to explain to my wife, since I consistently am being asked by her why, how come, etc. Dr. Weiss, do you agree?
I do agree. I think it's a good thing to notice the question why from your spouse, because I think what she's asking is, why did you do this to me? Or what is it about our marriage that made you do this? Or are you so unhappy with us? Often that question is really for spouses like, what can I figure out that I need to change, or we need to change, or even if it isn't changeable, maybe we need to separate or whatever. And the thing is, you know, and this is part of disclosure, and I didn't say this earlier, I think it's important to let spouses know that the behavior went on before you got together. Because for them to hear that this isn't about them at all, that this is something you've had your whole life, that you were struggling when you were dating, that you were struggling with your first partner or whatever it is, it's extremely important, I think, for them to hear. And let me say something to everyone. Let's see how many folks are here now. We got 40 folks here. So I have been doing, first of all, I've been in sexual recovery myself since 1985. I had hair on my head and no beard. I don't think I could grow a beard when I started program. And I've been doing this work as a therapist for 25 years. 25 years. I have been a therapist longer than most of your kids have been alive, okay? And a licensed therapist at that. And I can tell you, this is my whole life, right? I have never met any of us who don't have significant trauma in early childhood. Never, not one. Well, I'll qualify. Those who don't have trauma that leads to our addictive problems often have things like attention deficit disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder or other major or some form of depression, anxiety. If we're not already carrying into our addiction mental health issues, we are certainly carrying trauma. And I'm not here, I understand what cookie cutter therapy is, and cookie cutter therapy is where you sort of stamp everyone and say, you must have this and we're going to treat that. I don't know if the trauma you had is treatable. I don't know if the trauma you had makes a difference looking at it at all. But I do think that acknowledging that this came from somewhere allows us to be a little more forgiving with ourselves. You know, with all of that, beatings and molestation and like, yeah, something wasn't going to go right in life. I had a client at Seeking Integrity, really lovely man. I liked him a lot. And he was in treatment with us. And he said to me that when he was 17 years old, He left home and he said, everything that's happened here with these people, I'm going to put it in the past. I'm going to take my past and it's in the rearview mirror. I'm going to have a good marriage. I'm going to have a good job. Despite the fact that I was, whatever happened to him, beaten, alcoholic parents, he was determined to put his past behind him. And there he was sitting in a chair in my treatment center. And the reality is that you cannot fix things that are automatic, that are unconscious, that are just really broken inside. They require help and they require an active process. I don't know many healthy people who leave the people they love in the middle of the night or on weekends or during vacations to go have sex with strangers all the time, to look at porn all the time. That's just not what healthy people do. And if you think about where this comes from, there's only a few psychological areas. It either is we have mental health problems or we have trauma, and most of us have both. So welcome to the long, long ride that this recovery process is. On every level, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. We have problems in all those areas, and we have growing to do.
Agree. So the next question is, what is the best book you can recommend on trauma written by, in simplistic terms? Do you recommend anyone aside from Jamie Merritt? And I don't know all the trauma books. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I was just going to mention Jamie's site because all the trauma books are on her site.
Oh, there you go.
So I would want to ask Tammy why the person what they want to read, because much of the trauma that we experience has to do with our having to survive difficult early childhood experiences without a lot of support. I'm giving you some general ideas about trauma. Most of us, sex addicts, seem to have been pulled into focusing on our family's issues and our family's problems rather than just being a kid. So I know for me, I was my mom's best friend. I was my mom's lawyer and problem solver till the day she died. That was my job in life. But being a child wasn't very important for me, playing, having fun, being a kid, because my job was to take care of mom and to be there for my parents. So, my trauma is not that dissimilar from so many of us, where our caregivers ended up needing us more than they gave to us. And sometimes that's actually sexual, where they touched us or were inappropriate with us. For some of us, it's more emotional, where they needed us emotionally, and we became the sort of de facto husband for our moms and stuff like that. If you think trauma is at the heart of some of your issues, I would read books, some of the books on trauma that apply most directly to us. For men, I think Ken Adams' Married to Mom
and Silently Seduced
speak to the kind of early damage that happens when our parents or caregivers are broken. And I think it's a really good book to read for trauma survivors. Also, doesn't Mike Lew, Tammy, are you familiar with Mike Lew, L-E-W?
I'm not familiar with Mike Lew.
Let me see if I can't at the same, hold on one second.
And I just put in information for Dr. Adams, Overcoming Enmeshment information. He's got a website, but you can also find the books too.
Yeah, Mike Lew, sorry. This is great. So Tammy, there's a man by the name of Mike Lew, L-E-W, just came out with a second edition of his book called Victims No Longer. Classic guide for men recovering from sexual child abuse. So Mike Lew, because I remember Mike, and he's friends with Ken Adams, by the way. We've spent time together. Mike Lew, Ken Adams specifically writes about enmeshment with parents. Mike Lew writes about sexual abuse, and it's really a classic book for men because sexual abuse in men is different than it is in women. A lot of us don't have sexual trauma. It's all kinds of different traumas. So maybe this will get you started a little bit. Those are two titles I'd recommend. There are more sophisticated psychological titles you might read on trauma, but why don't you start with those? Tammy.
We're out of time.
I'm so sorry. Can we answer one more question? There's so many people here, and I just want to get through one more if we can.
Okay. That one's recommend therapy. So email me for therapist recommendation. So the next one is sex addict husband disclosure 2.8 confirmed prostitutes women she-male, strip clubs, chronic porn, masturbation before, after marriage, no acting out since late September, 30 plus years together, boundaries shared, committed to saving marriage, no sex hiatus thus far, going on vacation together 12 days, finding myself thinking about disclosure events, sad, angry, but trying to do EMDR. Will this vacation hurt our relationships or be a welcome time to spend together? Painful thoughts in head.
So I really have a good answer for you, and I think for all the spouses, to something like this. So this is a roller coaster ride that you're on, and unfortunately, part of this particular ride, I think I wrote about this at Out of the Doghouse, is that when you start to get closer is when you might start to get more afraid. In other words, I've had couples I've worked with who are doing really well. They're working on the coupleship and gone through disclosure, and then, like you said, they had a vacation or a weekend coming up. And maybe they had a wonderful weekend, wonderful vacation. Maybe they started being sexual again or getting close. It was really lovely. And then the next day, the spouse, you, is absolutely furious. Back on that place of, I can't believe I did this. Why did I let you in? Why did I? And that reminds me of what you're talking about, because I think for spouses, you know, you want to get close to us, but you also are afraid that we're going to set you up and hurt you again. And so even though you believe in our recovery, if we're really committed to it and doing it, when you get closer to us, when we go away together, when we're sexual again, it can't help but come up for you, that fear of, when am I going to hurt again? When is he going to hurt me again? And you may not have been thinking about how we're going to hurt you again in day-to-day life until we go on that vacation and we get close to you. And being close to us reminds you of what happens when you get close to us, which is you can get hurt. And so I wouldn't expect that you're going to have a perfect time together. What I do expect is you're going to pay a lot of attention to your feelings. And when you want to be together and you want to communicate, you're going to. When you want to have fun, you're going to have fun. And when you need some time and space to yourself, take it. The one thing I would say, this is a great question, and Tammy will totally love this, is take some phone numbers with you of people in recovery. Take if you're a spouse, take our spouses group time so that you can drop into that free spouses group while you're on vacation. Don't go on vacation and think, I'll just separate from my recovery and my healing because we're going on vacation. Stay connected to those people and those situations, even if you have a therapy session on the phone while you're away, just to know that you're going to be grounded in this vacation. That's a really, Tammy likes these ideas. So I think that would be a really good thing to think about. Hey guys, let me just say, if you want to find me, there's Sex, Love, and Addiction, the podcast. Podcasts are free. We just recorded a great one today. Our treatment center is Seeking Integrity. If you want to find out more about that, you can write Tammy at Seeking Integrity. We do all kinds of great stuff there, or you can go to seekingintegrity.com. If you're looking for free support or free groups, sexandrelationshiphealing.com is where you'll find all of that. I would say, honestly, 75% of what we do, we give away. We don't do nearly as much work that's paid as we do giving stuff away. And I hope that that has meaning for you guys as it does for us. Thank you, Tammy. I hope you have a great
Thanks,
night.
Dr. Rob. You
See you
too.
tomorrow.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.